everybody, this is Lara with your weekly video for Bitcoin for the week beginning Monday 30th of January 2023. We now have a clear breach of the bear market channel on the daily chart with two full daily candlesticks above and not touching that trend line of upward movement. We don't quite have a good breach on the weekly chart yet though, so I'm going to run the bearish alternate alongside the main bullish wave count, which I do now have some reasonable confidence in. The wave count is very bullish. It expects a third wave at primary degree, within a third wave at cycle degree is in its very early stages. There will still be multi-week corrections that could be deep along the way, and the first one, to be labelled intermediate 2, I expect is coming up sooner rather than later. I expect primary 3 to reach at least 390.113. That is not a target. That is my minimum expectation. I expect it to end above that point. It could end as high as over 2.5 million. That's possible, given past price behaviour of Bitcoin. Elliott wave analysis first, classic analysis last. The Elliott wave count sees a 5-wave impulse over at the all-time high to be labelled primary wave 1. Primary wave 1 begins when cycle wave 2 ends in December 2018. If you want to look at the structure of primary 1, look at last week's analysis and or click back through to the last monthly analysis. It will show you more detail of primary 1. Within primary 1, here's the end of 3, 4 and 5. Intermediate wave 5 is shorter than intermediate 3, the first time that's happened at a higher degree for Bitcoin, but it's a fifth wave to end a first wave impulse 1 degree higher, not a fifth wave to end a third wave 1 degree higher. So that's okay, it's perfectly acceptable, and for a normal market this would be absolutely acceptable. It exhibits a Fibonacci, or close to a Fibonacci ratio. It's close-ish to 0.618, the length of 3, but not that close. Primary 1 over here, primary 2 over here is a double zigzag, and this has a really good fit in terms of subdivisions at lower time frames. Primary 2 lasting 53 weeks in duration. Within primary 3, no second wave correction may move beyond its start below 15,480.69. This candlestick here is only Monday's incomplete session, so don't look at that weekly candlestick. This is the last completed weekly candlestick. It's not fully outside and not touching this trend line, and it has a really small range and a small body, so I want to wait one more week to see, or maybe two, we might need two, to see a proper breach of this bear market trend line on the weekly chart as well as the daily before I have enough confidence to discard an alternate bearish wave count. Let's take a look at the daily chart. The low of primary 2 down here is this point down here. Intermediate wave 1 within primary 3 looks incomplete. The minimum expectation for primary 3 is for it to reach at least 5.71 times the length of primary 1, because when I look back at Bitcoin's price history with a full Elliott wave count, that is the shortest third wave it's had in the past. So let's expect this to be equal to at least the shortest and possibly longer. Within primary 3, it may only subdivide as an impulse. That will be labelled intermediate 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Intermediate 1 is an incomplete impulse, with minor 1 an impulse, minor 2 an expanded flat, minor 3 has this beautiful curved look, so very typical of Bitcoin's third waves. Minor 4 fits as a running contracting triangle, and I checked the subdivisions and how it fits on the hourly chart. It fits beautifully. If 4 is over there, then 5 has begun at 22,895.70. I have a tentative target, just another, I keep trying to say it, I really want members to really understand my targets for Bitcoin are highly provisional. I tried to calculate the target for the end of the bull market with a full Elliott wave count up to December 2017. I was calculating it and analysing that one every day as it came to an end. I was expecting it to end, and I was expecting that year-long bear market. I identified the end of the bull market 6 days after it happened on 23rd of December 2017, but on the way up it just blew all my targets out of the water, and I gave up calculating targets at the end of that bullish run. It's just so difficult to calculate targets for Bitcoin because it doesn't reliably exhibit Fibonacci ratios between actionary waves, and that's what I'm using to calculate targets. So if that's unreliable, it makes my targets unreliable. Classic analysis is much a much better option to identify when Bitcoin's movements are over. And even then, as you've seen, the bear market lows are really hard to identify. And so this comes with that strong caveat. It's a provisional target only. At 26.016, minor 5 would reach 1.618, the length of minor wave 1. Minor wave 3, interestingly, is very close to 3.618, the length of minor 1. That's not a Fibonacci ratio, though, so I'm not going to note it on the chart. Just interesting to comment on. Here's a really important price point for us this week. Within minor wave 5, if minor 4 is over here and it has a really good fit as a triangle, we've got nice alternation with a flat here, triangle's a bit more brief, flat's longer lasting, fourth wave more brief than second, beautiful looking third wave. I have confidence in this triangle. So if minor 5 begins there, then within it, no second wave correction may move beyond its start, below 22,895.70. What that means is, if we see a new low below this price point in the next few days, it tells us intermediate wave 1 should be over, and intermediate wave 2 should then be underway. When that happens, I will draw a Fibonacci retracement along the length of intermediate wave 1, and I'll do it on a semi-log scale. I wouldn't do that for any other market bar cryptocurrencies. And I'll expect intermediate 2 in the first instance when it arrives to find support at the upper edge of this black channel, which I've copied over from the weekly chart. If it breaks through that, I'll expect it to reach the 0.618 Fibonacci ratio on a logarithmic scale of intermediate wave 1, and it may not move beyond the start of 1 below 15,480.69. I expect intermediate 2 is going to turn up sooner rather than later now. There's some support for it on classic technical analysis. And when it does turn up, I expect it could be deep, and I expect it to last a few weeks. At the daily chart level, this is the same as the last wave count up to this point here, and then what if instead of 4, 5, what if 4 was over at the last low? Now the problem with this wave count is minor 4 is 81 weeks in duration. Minor 4 is longer than cycle wave 2, 1 degree higher, and it's a lot longer than, intermediate. Intermediate 4 is much longer than cycle 2, 2 degrees higher, and it's a lot longer than intermediate 2. It's really common for Bitcoin to exhibit second and fourth waves that are disproportionate in terms of duration, but only the other way around. Really unusual, unless the fourth wave is a triangle, unusual for a fourth wave to be longer lasting than a second wave. So this is a popular wave count out there. That's pretty much the only reason I'm publishing it, and I'm just telling you for those reasons, in my judgment and my experience with this market, this has a really low probability. It is valid. I will have to keep running it alongside the main wave count. On the weekly chart, this is a bearish wave count because I'm not quite ready to discard this yet, not until this channel is properly breached by a candle of upward movement. We might not get that if intermediate 1 is over at the last high and intermediate 2 begins, so I might have to run this alongside for a while longer. It has a pretty low probability though. If primary 2 was not over down here, and if it continues for longer, then it's going to end up being quite a lot longer lasting than cycle wave 2, which lasted 51 weeks. At its low back here, for the main wave count, it's already 2 weeks longer than cycle 2. If it continues even further, it's just going to start to have really poor proportion in terms of the bigger picture. So this has a pretty low probability. But I want to judge these wave counts based on probability and not get hung up on one wave count and say that's the right wave count, because as soon as I do that, the market will prove me wrong. We need to be open-minded and flexible with these markets. What if primary 2 is not over? It may not move beyond the start of 1, below 3169.53. The final wave C down may end at support at the lower edge of this channel, and possibly shouldn't end below 9732. That's where primary 2 would reach a 90% correction of primary 1. On the weekly chart, this is the last completed week, we have a decline in volume and a decline in range. This upward movement is starting to slow down a little bit. This looks like the possible end of intermediate 1 coming sooner rather than later, and this may be resolved by a multi-week pullback for intermediate 2. Look out for support at 18,500. On balance, volume exhibits a little bullish divergence with price, or it did last week, and the last signal it gave was bullish. No new range though, no new signal. ADX is increasing still. It's above 15. It tells us a new upward trend is underway in an early stage on the weekly chart. RSI neutral, money flow neutral, stochastics overbought. ATR still declining as price moves higher. A little bit of weakness in this upward movement. That's okay actually for the start of a bull run for Bitcoin. It doesn't always start its bull runs strongly. It can start out with weakness. It doesn't show strength until it moves toward the middle and then it explodes at the end. So this is okay. And I leave this here. The correlation coefficient between Bitcoin and the S&P 500 is almost completely neutral. There's just no reliable correlation between these markets. So just because my analysis of one, the Bitcoin, says that it's in a new bull market, doesn't mean that my analysis of the other has to agree. They are not positively correlated, even though a lot of people assume they are. I don't like assumptions. I prefer to look at data and math. It looks like a little pennant pattern may have formed and an upward breakout may have occurred, and now a backtest of support. The target from the pennant I've calculated at 26,689. That's a little bit above my Elliott wave target. So about 26,600 to 26,700, around about there for the end of the next upward movement before we see intermediate one, unless it's over at this high. At this high, there is some bearish divergence between price on a closing basis and RSI after RSI reached fairly deeply overbought. Stronger bearish divergence seen between price and money flow, and ADX is now very extreme. It's above 55. That's what I consider very extreme for Bitcoin, although it can get up as high as 70. But this is a first wave within a third wave, not a third wave within a third wave. So it is in very extreme territory. Conditions are overbought. Volume is overall somewhat declining, although stronger on upward sessions, and range is declining. So this all fits with the Elliott wave count, expecting intermediate 1 is coming to an end sooner rather than later. Look out for the start of intermediate 2. It could surprise us. It could be coming up now or very soon. So it could begin this week or next week. That's it from me with your Bitcoin analysis this week. I hope everyone had an awesome weekend.